The stars over Kansas always seemed impossibly close. Jack Mason liked to think of them as old friends, steadfast and reliable, unlike the rusted heap of a truck he was currently elbow-deep in. It was a quiet night, the kind that made the edges of the world blur and left a man alone with his thoughts. Not that Jack had many deep thoughts. Mostly, he was cursing his decision to fix Old Man Tully's truck for the third time this month. The stillness shattered with a roar that didn't belong to any Kansas storm. Jack's head snapped up. A streak of light sliced across the sky, burning brighter than a harvest moon and trailing smoke like a comet on its last legs. "What in the—" Jack muttered, dropping the wrench that promptly clanged against his steel-toed boot. He yelped, hopping in place, but his eyes never left the streaking light. It arced downward, heading straight for the endless fields beyond town. The impact came a moment later, a muffled boom that rattled the ground beneath his boots and sent the distant tree line into a frenzy of startled birds. Jack wasn't the type to ignore a good mystery, especially one that might liven up his otherwise uneventful week. Grabbing his flashlight and tossing on a jacket, he hopped into his barely functioning pickup truck, which protested with a groan but begrudgingly roared to life. The crash site wasn't hard to find. A plume of smoke curled into the sky, illuminated by the soft glow of something embedded in the earth. Jack parked at the edge of the field, cutting the engine and stepping out cautiously. His flashlight beam caught the edges of a crater about 10 feet across, its center glowing faintly. "Okay, Jack," he muttered to himself. "Could be a meteor. Could be one of those secret government drones. Or, knowing your luck, it's probably radioactive cow poop from a weather balloon." The closer he got, the less plausible any of those explanations felt. The object wasn't a rock or a drone. It was a sleek, elliptical pod, its surface smooth and iridescent, like oil spilled across water. Thin trails of steam hissed from its edges, and the air around it hummed faintly. "Definitely not cow poop," Jack said under his breath, circling the pod. His reflection rippled across its surface like it was liquid instead of metal. Just as he reached out a cautious hand to touch it, the pod hissed and split open with a sharp pshht. Jack stumbled back, flashlight wobbling as something emerged. A figure, humanoid but unmistakably alien, unfolded, with an otherworldly grace. Her skin shimmered like crystal, refracting light into tiny rainbows that danced across the field. Her eyes were enormous, glowing softly like twin moons. "Okay, Jack," he said aloud, his voice shaking but still trying for humor. "This is officially above your pay grade." The alien girl swayed slightly, as though the effort of standing was too much. She looked at Jack, her expression equal parts curious and wary, and then spoke. Her voice was like music, a strange and melodic language that Jack didn't understand. Hi?" Jack ventured, raising a hand in what he hoped was a universal gesture of peace. "Welcome to Earth, I guess." The girl tilted her head as if considering his words, then took a shaky step forward. Jack took an instinctive step back, holding up both hands. "Hey now, let's not start with the probing, all right? I've had a long day." She frowned, or at least Jack thought it was a frown. Her crystalline face made reading expressions a bit like guessing the mood of a chandelier. Before Jack could say anything else, her knees buckled and she collapsed. "Oh, great," Jack muttered, rushing forward to catch her. He wasn't entirely sure what to do with an unconscious alien, but leaving her in the middle of a smoking crater didn't seem like the right call. As he lifted her, surprisingly light for someone who looked like she was made of gemstones, a series of beeping sounds came from the pod. Jack froze. "Please don't explode," he whispered. The pod didn't oblige. Instead, it emitted a piercing alarm and flashed a sequence of lights that felt ominously like a distress signal. "Fantastic," Jack grumbled, hauling the girl toward his truck. "I'm about to become the main course at an alien buffet." He got her into the passenger seat, then hurried back to grab the flashlight he'd dropped. The pod's lights blinked faster now, the beeping growing louder. Jack didn't need a translator to figure out what it meant. "Time to go," he said to no one in particular, sprinting back to the truck and slamming the door. The old vehicle roared to life just as a new sound filled the air, a low, mechanical whirring that made Jack's stomach drop. Looking in the rearview mirror, he saw something rise from the edge of the crater. Sleek, metallic, and unmistakably predatory, it looked like a cross between a drone and a mantis, with glowing red eyes and a distinctly unpleasant hum. Jack hit the gas. "All right, mystery girl," he said, glancing at the unconscious alien beside him. "I hope you're worth all this because we're about 2 steps away from starring in an alien version of Doomsday Roadkill." The truck bounced along the uneven dirt road, the mechanical creature gaining on them with terrifying speed. Jack swerved to avoid a rock, nearly sending them into a ditch. The girl stirred, her eyes fluttering open. She looked at Jack, then at the pursuing creature, and said something in her musical language that sounded suspiciously like, "Turn left." Jack blinked. "Did you just... wait, you can talk?" "Left," she insisted, gesturing emphatically. Jack yanked the wheel just as the creature lunged, its claws narrowly missing the truck's tailgate. They sped into a narrow gully, the walls rising steeply on either side. The creature hesitated at the edge before emitting a frustrated screech and retreating. Jack slowed the truck, his heart pounding. "Well, that was fun. Let's never do it again." The girl turned to him, her expression unreadable but somehow grateful. Thank you," she said haltingly, her voice now understandable but still musical. Jack stared at her. "You're welcome. Now who are you and why does it feel like I just signed up for the worst camping trip of my life?" She hesitated, then spoke a single word. "Lyra." Jack sighed, leaning back against the seat. "Well, Lyra, welcome to Kansas. Population, mostly cows and one very confused mechanic." Jack's workshop was a chaotic shrine to every repair project he'd ever started and abandoned. Tools dangled precariously from mismatched hooks. Engine parts sat in half-open boxes, labeled with scrawled notes like probably a carburetor. And an old jukebox in the corner belted out 70s rock on a loop because Jack had never figured out how to make it stop. Lyra sat cross-legged on a makeshift cot, looking out of place yet eerily calm in the middle of the mess. Her crystalline skin caught the light from the dangling fluorescent bulbs, refracting tiny rainbows onto the walls. She examined a socket wrench with the wide-eyed curiosity of someone who'd never seen human technology before, or perhaps just couldn't believe anyone would bother using it. Jack watched her from the other side of the room, leaning against his workbench and nursing a cup of coffee strong enough to dissolve paint. "So," he began, breaking the silence, "you're, definitely not from around here." Lyra tilted her head, her translucent features catching the light in a way that made Jack feel like he was talking to a living kaleidoscope. "I am... not." Her words were slow and deliberate, as if trying to mold the alien syllables of her language into something Jack could understand. "Well, that clears that up," Jack said, setting his coffee down. "Listen, Lyra, if that's even your real name..." "It is." "Great. So, care to explain why you crash-landed in the middle of Kansas and brought along a robot death bug? Because I've got to say, that's not how we usually do first impressions around here." Lyra's expression shifted, her crystalline features dimming slightly. "Vorath," she said, her voice soft but tinged with something heavy. Fear, maybe. "They hunt. They destroy." "Vorath," Jack repeated, tasting the word like it might bite him back. "Let me guess, they're not exactly here for a bake sale?" Lyra didn't laugh, but her lips curved into what Jack hoped was a faint smile. "They seek to consume, to assimilate. My people. We are gone. All but me." Jack blinked, taken aback. He hadn't expected her to drop that kind of bombshell so casually. "Whoa, hold on. You're saying you're the last what? Last of your species?" She nodded, her glow dimming further. "The Illumini. We were light. We were... beauty." Her voice cracked slightly, and for a moment, Jack saw not the alien girl with skin like starlight, but someone utterly alone, carrying the weight of an entire lost world. "Well, crap," Jack muttered, rubbing the back of his neck. I was not prepared for that level of existential tragedy before breakfast. He paused, then added, Not that I eat breakfast. Coffee counts, right? Lyra tilted her head again, clearly perplexed. Coffee? Counts for what? Never mind, Jack said quickly. Look, I'm sorry about your people, really. But now that you're here, we've got to figure out how to keep you safe. Those Vorath? They're still out there, right? They are relentless, Lyra confirmed, her voice taking on a sharp, metallic edge. If I am found, Earth will fall. Jack blinked. Oh, no pressure then. Lyra's head cocked slightly, as if studying him. You are unafraid? Jack snorted. Unafraid? No, I'm terrified. But I've got a rule. No panicking before the second cup of coffee. Keeps me sane. Lyra stared at him for a moment longer, then nodded solemnly. This is a good rule. Before Jack could respond, a soft meow interrupted them. Wrench, his perpetually annoyed orange tabby, sauntered into the room, tail flicking in disapproval at the alien presence. He stopped in front of Lyra and stared up at her with an intensity that only cats could manage. Oh, don't mind him, Jack said. Wrench thinks he owns the place. Don't take it personally. Lyra extended a hand, her fingers glowing faintly. Wrench sniffed her cautiously before butting his head against her palm and purring loudly. Well, that's new, Jack muttered. He usually hates everyone. Maybe you've got catnip in your DNA or something. Lyra looked genuinely pleased, though Jack couldn't tell if it was from the cat's approval or the joke. This creature is curious. That's one word for him, Jack said. All right, back to the whole keeping you alive thing. Any chance your pod has some kind of alien defense system, like, I don't know, a laser cannon? Lyra's expression dimmed again. The pod is damaged. Its signal, they will come. Jack sighed, dragging a hand down his face. Of course they will. Because why wouldn't my week include alien assassins? Fine, we'll figure something out. Step 1, you stay here and lay low. Step 2, I don't know, build a death ray or something. You can build a death ray? Lyra asked, her tone almost hopeful. Probably not, Jack admitted. But I can make a mean potato launcher. We could modify it? Lyra's confusion was palpable, but Jack waved her off. Never mind. The point is, we'll figure something out. I promise to keep you safe, and I'm not breaking that promise. Why? Lyra asked, her glowing eyes narrowing. Why would you help me? You do not know me. Jack hesitated, the weight of her question settling in the air. I guess, he said slowly, because someone's gotta. And right now, I'm the only someone around. Lyra studied him for a long moment before nodding. Your kindness is strange. Yeah, well, Jack said, grinning faintly. Welcome to Earth. On that night, as Lyra rested on the cot and Wrench curled up at her side, Jack sat at his workbench, fiddling with an old radio. He wasn't entirely sure why, but it felt like the right thing to do, like maybe, just maybe, someone out there would hear him. Calling all space cops, he muttered, twisting the dials. Or galactic plumbers. Heck, I'll take an interstellar janitor at this point. Static crackled through the speakers, but no answer came. Jack leaned back with a sigh, staring at the stars through the workshop's grimy window. Guess it's just us, kid, he murmured, glancing over at Lyra. Here's hoping we're enough. Morning in Kansas arrived in its usual understated way, the faint blush of dawn spilling over endless fields, the hum of crickets fading into birdsong, and Jack Mason wrestling with an uncooperative toaster in his workshop's kitchenette. I swear you've got one job, Jack muttered, jabbing at the stubborn appliance. You're not a spaceship. You're a glorified bread warmer. Work with me here. Behind him, Lyra observed the scene with a bemused expression. She sat cross-legged on the floor, tinkering with an old circuit board Jack had given her to keep her occupied. Her crystalline fingers glowed faintly as they worked, bending the ancient wires with precision. What are you doing? Lyra asked, her voice lilting and curious. "Trying to coax this toaster into doing its job," Jack replied, giving the appliance one final thwack. It promptly spit out a piece of toast with the consistency of a brick. "Ah, success. Breakfast of champions." He held it up like a trophy before grimacing. "Or possibly dental hazards." Lyra tilted her head. "Is all of your technology this obstinate?" "Only the stuff I can afford," Jack said, dropping the toast onto a plate with a dramatic clunk. "Speaking of which, how's that circuit board coming along? Any chance you're building us a doomsday weapon?" Lyra's crystalline face shifted into what Jack had come to recognize as amusement. "It is not a weapon, but I believe I can enhance your vehicle's systems. It will help us avoid detection." Jack raised an eyebrow. "You're telling me you can turn my rust bucket into a stealth mobile?" Lyra looked confused. "Your bucket of rust?" Jack waved her off. "Figure of speech. Never mind. Just tell me this won't blow up the truck. Or us." Lyra's expression grew serious. "I understand your concern. The modifications are safe." She paused. "Mostly." "Mostly?" Jack echoed, his voice pitching higher. "Oh, good, that's comforting." An hour later, Jack stood beside his truck, staring at its newly modified dashboard. Lyra had integrated the circuit board seamlessly, its glowing wires now embedded in the old panel. "Okay," Jack said, climbing into the driver's seat. "Moment of truth. Let's see if this thing actually works or if we're about to make Kansas's shortest obituary." Lyra slid into the passenger seat, her movements fluid and unhurried. "Trust me," she said simply. "Sure," Jack muttered, turning the key. The engine roared to life, sounding smoother than it ever had. "Well, that's a good sign. What now?" Lyra reached out, placing a glowing hand on the dashboard. The truck hummed softly, its interior lights flickering before stabilizing. "The cloaking system is operational," Lyra said. "It will render us invisible to most detection methods." Jack blinked. "Most? What about the ones it doesn't work on?" "Let us hope we do not encounter them," Lyra replied with a faint smile. Jack sighed, gripping the steering wheel. "You've got a real knack for optimism, you know that?" Their first test of the modified truck came sooner than expected. Jack and Lyra were heading into town to stock up on supplies when Lyra stiffened in her seat, her glowing skin dimming slightly. "They are near," she said, her voice tense. "They as in Vorath." Jack didn't wait for further explanation. He slammed his foot on the gas, the truck lurching forward as Lyra activated the cloaking system. The world outside shimmered faintly, the edges of the vehicle blurring into the surrounding scenery. Behind them, a sleek black drone shot into view, its red eyes scanning the landscape. It hovered for a moment, then began to move methodically, searching. Jack's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. "Please tell me this thing's not going to figure out we're here." Lyra closed her eyes, her glow intensifying as she focused. "The cloaking field is holding. It cannot see us." "Good. Great. Love that for us." Jack glanced at the drone in the rearview mirror, his pulse racing. "But what happens if it does see us? You got a plan B?" Lyra opened her eyes, looking surprisingly calm. "Plan B is improvisation." "Improvisation?" Jack repeated, incredulous. "That's not a plan. That's what I do when my toaster breaks." As if to prove her wrong, the drone suddenly shifted direction, heading straight for them. Lyra's glow brightened. "It has detected energy fluctuations. I can—" Before she could finish, Jack yanked the wheel, sending the truck careening down a narrow dirt road. The drone followed, its engines whining as it accelerated. "Improvisation it is!" Jack yelled, the truck bouncing violently over the uneven terrain. Lyra pressed her hands to the dashboard, her voice steady despite the chaos. "Turn right. There is a path." Jack didn't wait for her to finish. He turned sharply, the truck skidding but staying upright. Ahead of them, the air shimmered oddly, as if heat waves were bending the light. What the hell is that? Jack asked, narrowing his eyes. A distortion, Lyra said. It is unstable. I believe it is a wormhole. Jack stared at her. You believe? You're not sure? There is no time for certainty, Lyra replied. Drive through it. Drive through it? Jack repeated, his voice rising. Lady, I don't even like driving through puddles. The drone closed in behind them, its red eyes glowing ominously. Jack gritted his teeth. Fine. Wormhole it is. But if we end up in a black hole, I'm haunting you in whatever afterlife aliens believe in. The truck hit the distortion at full speed. For a moment, the world around them stretched and warped, the laws of physics bending like soft taffy. Jack felt his stomach flip as colors he couldn't name exploded around them. And then, just as suddenly as it began, it was over. The truck screeched to a halt on solid ground, the wormhole collapsing behind them with a faint pop. Jack let out a shaky breath, his hand still gripping the wheel. Never. Again. Lyra glanced at him, her expression unreadable. You handled it well. Oh yeah, Jack said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Real smooth. Just me, the truck, and the abyss of cosmic horror. No big deal. Lyra tilted her head. You are resilient. Jack snorted. That's one word for it. He leaned back against the seat, closing his eyes for a moment. All right, Lyra, next time, you're driving. Lyra's faint smile returned. Agreed. The truck rolled to a stop on the outskirts of a small town, its tires kicking up dust as the engine settled into an unremarkable hum. Jack stared out the windshield at the sleepy little corner of Earth that had, until a few hours ago, been blissfully unaware of the impending alien invasion. He could see the usual mundane sights of a rural American town, gas station, diner, a few houses here and there, but his mind wasn't on any of that. It was on the drone they'd narrowly avoided, the fact that Vorath were still hunting Lyra, and the eerie sense that they were being watched. He flicked the dashboard, checking the cloaking system. It was still active, but Jack didn't trust technology as far as he could throw it. And the truck, well, it wasn't exactly a spacefaring vessel designed for stealth. This place feels wrong, Jack muttered, glancing over at Lyra. She didn't respond right away. Instead, she was staring out of the passenger window, her crystalline face reflecting the sunlight in 1,000 different shades of blue. I do not know this world, Lyra said quietly. There is much noise. So many things happening. It is overwhelming. Jack shrugged. Welcome to Earth, kid. It's a mess. But hey, at least the food's cheap. Lyra's glowing eyes met his. You are not afraid? Jack snorted. Afraid of what? A tiny planet full of crazies who can't agree on pizza toppings? Nah. I've been in worse scrapes. Worst case, we have a nice dinner and then I make a quick exit. He glanced at her. You've got my back, right? I will keep you safe, Lyra said. The way she said it was so calm, so absolute, that for a moment, Jack almost believed her. Almost. Well, here goes nothing, Jack said, stepping out of the truck and slamming the door behind him. The town stretched out before them, too quiet for Jack's liking. No kids running around, no chatter, just stillness. Lyra followed him, her gait smooth, almost ethereal, like she wasn't fully tethered to the ground. Jack had seen enough sci-fi movies to know that didn't bode well. So, the plan? Jack asked, adjusting his jacket. He felt a little ridiculous in the worn denim, but then again he wasn't planning to blend in with the locals anytime soon. We need supplies, Lyra said, her gaze already darting around, scanning the area. Food, water, materials. We will need to make a weapon. A weapon? A weapon? Jack turned to her, incredulous. Lady, I'm barely keeping this truck running, and now you want me to build you a weapon? What, do you want me to make a laser gun out of duct tape and chewing gum? Lyra didn't seem fazed. Your technology is crude, but I can help. I can enhance it. Jack rubbed his forehead. Look, I'm not exactly an engineer, all right? I'm just a guy with a broken truck and a slightly questionable moral compass. Lyra's glowing eyes softened. You are more than you believe. Thanks, I think, Jack muttered, still unsure whether he was talking to a sentient being or an oddly wise fortune cookie. They walked into the town's main square, the silence growing more oppressive with every step. No one was around, no pedestrians, no workers, not even a dog barking at the sky. Jack felt the hair on the back of his neck stand up. Something wasn't right. I don't like this, Jack said, his voice low. This place should be buzzing by now. Lyra's eyes flicked toward the horizon, and Jack followed her gaze. Far in the distance, a faint shimmering outline hovered in the sky. That's new, Jack said, his voice growing tense. What the hell is that? I don't know, Lyra said, her voice tight, but it is not normal. Jack's hand instinctively went to the old, rusted revolver tucked into his belt. It wasn't much, but it had gotten him out of enough scrapes to be his backup plan. All right, let's keep moving. Stay sharp. The two of them turned toward the diner, which was probably the only building open at this hour. Jack's stomach rumbled, and he found himself almost thankful for the simple distractions of normal life. Something to take his mind off the looming cosmic threat. Inside, the diner was dimly lit and oddly empty, save for the haggard-looking waitress behind the counter who gave them a tired smile as they entered. Morning, she said, as if they weren't two out-of-place strangers with an alien on their hands. What can I get you? Coffee, and maybe a look at the menu, Jack said, sliding into a booth. It's a long drive, and I think we've earned some normalcy. Lyra sat down next to him, her posture perfect, but her eyes darting around the room. Jack could see the strain on her face, the way she was scanning everything, from the waitress's stained apron to the flickering neon sign in the window. She was still on edge. Make it 2 coffees, Jack added, trying to break the tension. And a piece of pie if you've got it. Whatever's the most earthy. The waitress nodded and wandered off toward the kitchen. Jack leaned back, trying to relax, but the silence of the diner felt like it was pressing down on him. He couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't alone. The waitress returned moments later, setting down 2 mugs of steaming coffee and a plate of pie that looked suspiciously fresh, despite the lack of anyone else in the diner. Here you go, she said, with a smile that was a little too wide. Pie of the day. Try the cherry. Jack glanced at Lyra, who was still looking around with that same unnerving intensity. Everything okay? He asked quietly. Lyra's eyes met his, her voice barely a whisper. There is something wrong with them. They are not human. Jack froze. What? Before he could say anything else, the door to the diner swung open, and a figure stepped in, cloaked in shadow. A man, or something that looked like a man, stood in the doorway, his features hidden beneath a wide-brimmed hat. The waitress didn't seem to notice. She just smiled at the newcomer. Morning. What can I get you? The man didn't answer immediately. Instead, he took a step forward, and Jack's stomach dropped. The air seemed to thicken around him, as though the very atmosphere was bending under the weight of something unnatural. Lyra's voice was low, urgent. He is one of them. Jack felt a chill run down his spine. You mean one of the Vorath? Lyra nodded. We need to leave. Now. Before Jack could react, the man's eyes glowed red, and everything around them seemed to freeze. The waitress, still smiling, stood motionless, her eyes glazed over as though she were nothing more than a puppet. Jack stood up, knocking his coffee mug over, his heart pounding in his chest. Lyra, we need a plan. Now. But it was already too late. The man in the doorway wasn't alone. Another figure stepped out from the shadows, and then another, and another. The Vorath had found them. The diner's door closed with an ominous thunk, the soft echo reverberating like the sound of a prison cell locking shut. Jack's pulse raced as the creature stood there, his glowing red eyes locked on them. The other figures behind him stepped into the light, their movements smooth and unnervingly synchronized. Jack felt a small pang of regret for his earlier overconfidence, If he'd known his day would end with an intergalactic showdown in a greasy spoon diner, he'd have brought something stronger than a weak cup of coffee and a bad attitude. "All right, pal," Jack muttered under his breath. "You couldn't have picked a worse time for this. I was about to have pie." He shot a sidelong glance at Lyra, who was standing beside him, her body rigid with tension. "You have any idea what's going on here?" Lyra's eyes flicked over the newcomers, her face a mask of concentration. "Vorath," she said, her voice low. "They are the ones hunting me, and they do not give up easily." Jack had a sinking feeling that things were about to get worse. His hand instinctively hovered over the revolver at his side, though it felt more like a gesture of defiance than something that could actually help. The creature in the doorway, who Jack noted, was much taller than the average human, tilted its head slightly as though considering them with some strange amusement. The red eyes flickered briefly, and then to Jack's surprise, the creature's mouth split into something resembling a smile. Well, what do we have here?" The creature spoke, its voice deep, resonating with an unnatural cadence. It was almost as if the words weren't fully its own, but more like they were being channeled through it. I had expected the girl to be more solitary. Lyra took a step forward, her hand unconsciously curling into a fist. "I am not afraid of you." Jack, meanwhile, took a more pragmatic approach. He casually nudged the waitress's mug of coffee back onto the counter, making sure it didn't spill. "Yeah, that's cute and all," he said, "but I'm guessing you didn't come here for small talk." The creature's smile widened. "Indeed, we came for her, but you—" It paused, its red eyes narrowing. "You are an unexpected variable." "I get that a lot," Jack said, raising his hands in mock surrender. "Not that I mind. I love being the surprise twist in someone else's plot. But I gotta ask, pal, why us? What do you want with her, and why a diner? Is it a secret Vorath ritual to invade Earth from small-town diners? You're not exactly blending in, you know." Lyra shot him a glare that could have incinerated an asteroid. Jack grinned. In a situation like this, humor was the only thing keeping his brain from short-circuiting. The Vorath remained silent for a moment, and then the creature stepped forward, its long limbs moving with a disturbing fluidity. "You don't understand, human. You don't know who you're dealing with." Its voice was like a low hum vibrating through the air. "I could kill you with a flick of my wrist." Yeah, I've heard that line before." Jack raised an eyebrow, not even bothering to reach for his gun. "And yet, here we are, all of us standing around just talking. If you could kill me, we'd already be in a different chapter of this story." Lyra shot him a look that clearly said, "Don't tempt fate." Jack ignored it. What else was he supposed to do? Panic? Scream? Neither were exactly on his to-do list. The creature's smile vanished, replaced by an expression of cold calculation. "You mistake your position, human. Your kind has no place in this. This war, this hunt, is beyond your comprehension." Jack wasn't sure how to respond to that, so instead, he turned to the waitress, who was still standing behind the counter as though frozen in time. "Hey, I hate to be a bother, but could we get a refill?" Lyra, her voice strained, whispered, "Jack, stop." "They are controlling her." Jack blinked. "Controlling? So we're talking mind control now? Great, just great." He cleared his throat. "Look, I'm not saying I don't appreciate the dinner service, but I think we've got bigger problems. I would suggest you focus on bigger matters," the Vorath said, its voice now dripping with disdain. "But you do amuse me. How quaint, how human you are. I'd love to stick around and chat more about my innate charm, but I've got a bad feeling about where this conversation's going," Jack said. "So, Lyra, I hate to ask, but what are the odds you've got some kind of plan for this?" Lyra's glowing skin dimmed slightly as she looked at the Vorath. "I have some ideas, but I cannot fight them all at once. It would take too much energy." "Ah, so we're talking about energy now," Jack said, thinking for a second. Okay. How about this? I distract them. You do whatever it is you do, and we get the hell out of here. You up for it? I will not leave you behind. Her tone was firm, resolute. I will protect you, Jack. That is the promise I made. Jack's heart did a weird little flip. Great. Now he had an alien girl who believed in him. Just what he needed. But the part of him that wasn't thinking about all the danger felt a strange warmth in his chest. All right, he said, pulling himself together. No heroics. We do this smart. You ready to light this place up? Lyra nodded. I am. The Vorath took another step forward. Your foolishness will be your undoing, it said, raising its arm as if to strike. We are far beyond your understanding, human. Jack was about to make a snappy retort when the room around him seemed to warp. The air grew thick as though reality itself was being twisted. A low hum filled the diner, and Jack's heart skipped. This was it. This was what he had been waiting for. Time to improvise, Jack muttered, reaching into his jacket pocket and pulling out a small device, a relic from one of his earlier escapades, a cheap, rudimentary EMP grenade he'd picked up from a shady dealer a few months ago. Hey, I didn't say I was good at this, Jack said, grinning at Lyra, but I sure as hell know how to make an exit. Before the Vorath could react, Jack tossed the EMP grenade onto the floor. It emitted a sharp crack, followed by a burst of electromagnetic energy that rippled through the diner. The Vorath froze, their eyes flickering as if they were rebooting. For a split second, everything went still. Then, chaos erupted. Lyra's glowing hands flared with energy, and the world around them seemed to pulse with power. Jack didn't know what she was doing, but it was working. The Vorath staggered back, their forms flickering like bad static on a broken screen. Jack grabbed Lyra's hand and tugged her toward the door. Let's go. They bolted for the exit, but as Jack glanced over his shoulder, he saw the Vorath creatures regrouping, their eyes burning brighter now with fury. Don't look back, Lyra shouted, and Jack didn't need to be told twice. They ran out into the street, into the open, with no plan except to keep running and pray they didn't get caught. The town was still eerily quiet as Jack and Lyra sprinted down the street, the sound of their footsteps echoing off the abandoned buildings. Behind them, the diner had erupted into chaos, but Jack didn't dare look back. Every second counted now. The Vorath were regrouping, and they had already proved they didn't care for pleasantries. Okay, this is getting ridiculous, Jack panted, glancing over at Lyra as they dashed through the empty street. I'm starting to think Earth wasn't really designed for this whole alien invasion thing. You know, what with the lack of decent transportation, the complete absence of cool gadgets, and, oh yeah, no one else around to help. Lyra, her strides graceful and unbroken, kept pace effortlessly. Her glowing skin pulsed in the twilight, casting soft blue light across the cracked sidewalks. She didn't respond at first, too focused on their surroundings. Jack took that as a sign to keep talking, which was honestly how he kept his head together in situations like this. You know, in a weird way, this is kind of like those zombie apocalypse movies, but with less brain-eating and more glowing eyes, Jack added, his voice higher-pitched than usual. And I thought I had bad luck with taxes. Lyra gave him a sidelong glance, her expression unreadable. What are zombies? Jack blinked. Right. You haven't had time for that pop culture education. They're like reanimated humans who want to eat people. It's a whole thing. I see, she said slowly, as if trying to process the concept. So, the Vorath are not unlike these zombies? Jack chuckled. Well, no. Zombies are mostly a mindless, brain-hungry menace. Vorath, though, they're like the corporate CEOs of intergalactic tyranny. They have a plan, they have a mission, and they're all too willing to destroy anyone who stands in their way. Lyra's eyes darkened for a moment. They will not stop hunting me, Jack. They never do. Yeah, well, I'm not giving them a chance. Jack's voice took on a tone of determination, and he picked up the pace, dodging around a rusted car that had been left abandoned in the street. We need to find a place to hide, and fast. Do you know anywhere around here that isn't crawling with Vorath or random zombie-like creatures? Lyra's eyes scanned their surroundings. She didn't seem as worried as she should have been. at least not visibly. There is a place, a small shelter, I think. She pointed to a narrow alley up ahead, partially concealed by a few overgrown trees. Lead the way, Jack said, giving the alley a wary look. The shadows seemed to stretch unnaturally long there, like they were waiting for something. They ducked into the alley, and as soon as they were out of the main street, the atmosphere felt different, quieter. The hum of distant engines, the faint glow of neon signs, all seemed to fade into the background. Jack couldn't help but breathe a little easier, even though the weird sense of being followed was still heavy in his chest. You sure this place is safe? Jack asked, eyeing the darkened corners of the alley. There was something about the way the air felt, stale, even for an alleyway. It made him uneasy. Lyra paused, her hand on the side of a crumbling brick wall. I think so, but we need to make it inside quickly. They hurried through the alley, dodging broken crates and overgrown vines, and then came upon an old rusted door tucked into a corner that looked like it had been forgotten by time. There was no sign, no indication of what was inside, but something about it screamed, weirdly useful. Jack approached the door, pulling on the handle. It creaked, the rusty hinges protesting. Inside, the air was thick and smelled of musty old books and stale metal. It looked like a storage unit, nothing fancy, but it was better than nothing. Home sweet home, Jack muttered, stepping inside. Lyra followed, but her eyes didn't leave the alleyway. She stood still for a moment, as if listening for something, before joining him inside and pulling the door shut behind them with a soft thud. Jack glanced around the dim space. The room was cluttered with junk, piles of old furniture, broken-down tech, and half-scrapped machines that looked like they'd been scavenged from forgotten corners of the city. It was like a junkyard inside, but a junkyard with potential. This place is something else, Jack remarked, stepping over a discarded hunk of machinery that looked like it had once been part of a hovercar. I'll bet no one even remembers this place, Lyra nodded absently, walking to the center of the room. It's a temporary refuge. It will do. Jack, feeling the weight of the silence around them, leaned against a wall and sighed. All right, Lyra, we've got a moment to breathe. What the hell do we do next? Lyra turned to face him, her glowing skin dimming slightly. The Vorath will find us eventually. They always do. We need to prepare to fight back. Jack scratched his head. Fight back? Listen, I don't have an army of cool weapons stashed somewhere. I have a truck, a few gadgets, and an EMP grenade that probably won't work again. You're going to have to be a little more specific here. Lyra's eyes flashed briefly, and then she moved toward one of the old machines, her hands brushing over it with a delicate, almost reverential touch. I can modify this. Use the parts to build something. Jack raised an eyebrow. Something like what? A giant laser cannon? Or maybe just a really annoying laser pointer that can piss them off from a distance? Something that will work, Lyra said. Her tone was quiet but firm. She didn't sound like she was joking. Jack was about to ask what exactly she was planning when a loud crack rang out from the alley, followed by the unmistakable sound of footsteps, slow and deliberate, like the footsteps of someone, or something, who had all the time in the world. Jack froze. He knew that sound. That doesn't sound good, he muttered. Lyra's eyes snapped to the door, her hands glowing once again. They're here! Jack cursed under his breath. I swear, it's like they can sense when I'm trying to take a nap. Lyra glanced at him sharply. You should stop making jokes. Oh, right, Jack said, suddenly more serious. No time for comedy. Got it. He glanced around the cluttered room. All right, plan B. What's the plan? Lyra walked over to a small workbench in the corner, her eyes scanning the scattered tools. We need to create a diversion. Then we escape. Diversion? With what? Jack said, looking at the pile of junk. I don't exactly have a stash of fireworks in my backpack. Lyra smiled slightly, though it was tinged with a rare flash of amusement. I think I can manage. Jack watched her work, still unsure of what she was building. It wasn't until she grabbed a long, thin piece of metal that something clicked in his mind. Oh, now I'm starting to get the picture. Before he could make another quip, Lyra finished whatever she was constructing with a swift motion. The result was a device, compact, sleek, and dangerous looking. "You better hope this works," Jack said, a nervous grin forming. "Otherwise, I'm going to have to start calling you MacGyver." Lyra didn't smile back. "Focus, Jack." The sound of the footsteps grew louder. The Vorath were closing in. It was time to put the plan into action. The night sky was still scattered with stars, though they no longer seemed quite as far away. Jack stood in the center of the small clearing, looking out over the sprawling city below. The lights of the urban expanse twinkled like a constellation of their own, but now they felt more like a distant memory, something he had once been a part of, but no longer really recognized. "Can I ask you something?" Jack said, glancing over his shoulder at Lyra, who stood by the makeshift campfire they had created, her silhouette framed by the flickering flames. Her glowing skin cast a soft blue hue, but there was something in her posture now, less tense, more relaxed. She turned her head, the movement graceful and deliberate. "You may ask," she said. There was a hint of amusement in her voice, like she had grown accustomed to Jack's constant questioning. Jack scratched the back of his neck, suddenly unsure of how to phrase what had been on his mind for days. "What happens now?" Lyra tilted her head, her bright eyes reflecting the firelight. "What do you mean?" "After all of this," Jack said, waving his hand toward the campfire and the quiet city beyond them. "After the Vorath, after the running, the hiding, the explosions and everything else, where do we go from here?" For a long moment, there was only the crackling of the fire. Lyra stood silently, as if contemplating the question with more depth than Jack had expected. Then she spoke, her voice softer, more vulnerable than it had been before. "I do not know, Jack," she said. "The Vorath are gone, for now, but I have no place to return to. My people, my world, they are gone." She exhaled, a soft sigh that barely made a sound. "I am the last of my kind, and now the world I find myself in is strange to me." Jack didn't know how to respond to that. There was no easy way to say, "I'm sorry for an entire species' destruction." And frankly, he didn't want to sound like a sap. So he chose a different approach. Humor. "Well, you could always try being the last human on Earth like me. We're pretty good at figuring things out. Eventually," he grinned, trying to lighten the moment. Lyra looked at him with a small smile tugging at the corner of her lips. "You are strange, Jack, but I have come to appreciate your unique perspective." Jack held up his hands in mock surrender. "Hey, I try. I mean, if you're going to survive an alien invasion and an intergalactic bounty hunt, you could use some entertainment along the way, right?" Lyra laughed softly, a sound that was rare but real. Jack's heart gave a strange, inexplicable thud at the sound. Maybe, just maybe, things weren't so bad after all. They had made it through. Against all odds, they had outsmarted the Vorath, survived a series of increasingly insane situations, and, most importantly, had formed an unlikely bond. "Well," Jack said, glancing up at the sky, "maybe this is the universe's way of telling me I'm not as bad at this whole hero thing as I thought." Lyra's laughter faded into a thoughtful silence. She stepped closer to the fire, her gaze turning back toward the distant lights of the city. "You are more than that, Jack." He raised an eyebrow, amused. "I'm more than a hero. What, like some kind of intergalactic savior?" "I do not know about that," Lyra said, her voice distant. "But you have become something important to me. You remind me that there is still hope in this world, a world that has lost much." Jack blinked. This was more than he had expected. Important? To someone like Lyra? He wasn't sure how to process that. His life had always been about surviving day to day, making it to the next day, and maybe getting a laugh or two in between. But this was something entirely new. I don't know if I'm exactly the hopeful type, Jack muttered, scratching his chin. But hey, if you need someone to help you find new weird tech and save the day every now and then, I'm your guy. Lyra turned to face him fully now, her expression earnest. I am not sure what the future holds, but I think it will be less lonely if we face it together. The words settled over him like a weight, but it wasn't a burden. It was a promise. Jack had never been one for grand speeches or epic declarations, but as he stood there with Lyra, the weight of it felt right. He had gone from just another guy stuck in the middle of a mess to someone who might actually make a difference. We'll figure it out, Jack said, more to himself than anyone else. You and me, one step at a time. The fire crackled again, the warmth wrapping around them both. It was a strange, comforting feeling, considering everything they'd been through. Maybe this whole mess hadn't been so pointless after all. Lyra nodded, her eyes glinting in the firelight. Yes, together. Jack smiled. Maybe next time we get chased by aliens, we should aim for a nice beach. I'm thinking fewer explosions and more sitting. Lyra raised an eyebrow, as though considering this new option. A beach? I think I would like that. She paused, then added, Do you always joke about everything? Jack's grin widened. It's how I survive. Besides, if you can't laugh in the face of certain death, what's the point of living? For the first time since he met Lyra, Jack felt an odd sense of peace. The galaxy might be big, and there were still countless dangers lurking in the dark corners of space. But here, in this small moment, he knew something for sure. He was no longer just a guy running from trouble. He was someone who had made a difference. Come on, Jack said, standing up and offering his hand to Lyra. I know a place we can hide out for a while. No aliens, no explosions, just a quiet night for once. Lyra hesitated for only a moment before taking his hand, her glow flickering warmly as she stood beside him. Together, they turned away from the fire, their silhouettes merging with the night, ready for whatever came next. The world, it seemed, was still theirs to shape, and for the first time, Jack didn't feel quite so alone.